Okay, so our engineer's square. This is called the blade of the square, the thinner section, and this is the stock of the square. Okay, so you want to look after them. You want to get a fairly decent one, and you don't want to drop them because that can knock them out of square. You really need a good square for accuracy and good consistent woodworking right from the start. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is check the timber we have is square. So I'm going to check the end. So I'm putting a nice lot of pressure up against this wider section, up against this stock. If you start holding them up here, it can get a little bit inaccurate, a little bit difficult to hold. Okay, so 2 fingers, push up that flat, nice and square. Okay, and I'm just going to sight along this edge and see if there's any gaps or any chinks of light peeking through, which I cannot see, which is good. And on this one I actually can see a little chink of light poking through that end, so that's no good. I'm going to go back to this end. Okay, so I'm going to go for this one. Next thing I'm going to do is check the edges, same fashion, stock nice and flat up against the timber. Okay, so no holding this bit, nice and flat up against there, and sight down. Nope, I can't see anything there, that's good. So just checking all the way around. Yeah, they look good. So I'm using a pen here, but very sharp pencil. Okay, I was just using a pen because it would probably be easier for you to see. All right, so I'm just going to have a look, check for any knots, any weird grain, anything I don't like. But that all looks good. So I'm going to go for this as my face side. Okay, and this one my face edge. So that I'm always going to reference from those 2 sides. So it's really important for consistency. If anything is out, if you're marking from the same sides all the time, you'll negate any error. So it's really important to get those face sides and edges marked from the start. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that in my vise. Okay, so a vise is really important. The more stable your timber is, the more accurate you're going to be, because you're not going to be trying to hold a timber, a ruler, an engineer's square. So if you can immobilise your timber, that's one thing sorted and you haven't got to worry about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I can just bring that in a bit more, is I'm going to start by marking every 10mm across the top of my piece of timber. So I've got just a standard steel rule here, and what I'm going to do is, if you can see on there, I'm going to start with this line here. So it's a nice clear line, it's easier to see, and it's more accurate to line up that nice big line than it is try and feel with your finger and get this on the end of your timber. So I'm going to move along to my 100mm mark there, just put a little bit of pressure downwards and just put a little tick mark every 10mm. Okay, so in furniture making we generally use millimeters, not centimeters. Okay, so in any engineering drawings or technical drawings, anything like that, you'll normally find that it's always in millimeters. So I've got my little tick marks across the top there. Okay, so there's little black dots, and like I say, I'm going to get the stock of my square pushed up against here, nice and firm. Okay, so don't start holding it like this, because it's very easy to rock and get some gaps down in here or in here, and then your lines won't be parallel across the surface, perpendicular to this one. Okay, so I'm going to slide my square up to that first tick mark and draw a nice line across. So you want a nice, neat, even line. Okay, don't start going backwards and forwards. You'll just make that line wider and you'll increase your inaccuracy. Okay, so just a nice, neat stroke all the way along. Now when I get to this edge, it starts to get a little tippy as I'm beginning to get the stock off the timber. So what I'm going to do is flip that over, so I've got a nice long reference edge here, and there's no chance of that tipping. Move that up to my next line. Okay, so that's my 10mm lines marked all the way across the top. Nice and neat, nice even strikes with your pencil. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark down 30mm from this edge I've just marked. Again, I'm coming up to my 100mm because it's nice and easy to see, and come down 10, 20, 30mm, and again just a little tick mark just on there. So I'm going to find my face edge. Okay, so remember we've checked that that's our reference surface, so I'm always going to put the stock of my square on that reference surface. So you can mark it any way you like. There's lots of different ways and symbols people have. Some people do like an F mark and a little arrow, but as long as you understand it, just go for it. So again, my square pinched nice and tight up against there. Bring that along to my tick mark, and then again just a nice light even strike, okay, all the way across. And I'm going to come to this side, do the same thing there. Okay, so again I'm on my reference edge. Okay, so there's my mark. Just bring my square up to that line, level it up, and a nice strike with the pencil. Okay, and then I'm going to come across this side again from my reference face edge, line that up and come across here. Okay, so for this one I'm going to come from my face side this time and join up this edge, and hopefully your lines all the way around will meet up. Okay, now what I'm going to do is mark these lines down the face of my piece of timber. I'll do it this way around so you can see. So again, the stock nice on there, nice and firm, and line that up and just an even strike down. And again, nice and controlled, nice light touch. I'm going to pinch that stock flat on my timber, so I'm going to turn that around so it's got nice large reference area for it to sit on. That's the top and the side facing you, so I'm just going to do the same on my side now. One thing you want to be careful of is when you're coming down like this, that the tail of your blade here isn't actually hitting the table and giving you a false reference. Okay, so have this up in the vise enough so that this isn't hitting on the table. Your time with the marking out. Marking out is one of the most important things. If you don't get your marking out accurate, however good your saw is, however good your chiseling is, you'll never be cutting an accurate mark. If you're cutting to those lines and your lines are incorrect, you're never going to get good, consistent, accurate furniture making. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, I'm just going to drop it down a little bit lower in my vise. So I'm quite short, so I don't want my timber up here, so all my shoulders are hunched up and bunched up. I want to be able to move my arm freely. This is a Veritas. Okay, so that's a Canadian brand. This lovely walnut handle, actually I think it's Babinga. Yep. So, and I've got a nice firm spine here on the back of the blade to stop any flexing. Okay, so these are a really nice saw. Okay, so to start with, when I'm sawing, I don't want to be too close, okay, to what I'm doing, because I'm never going to be able to get my saw parallel to those lines. Naturally, if I'm stood this close, my arm wants to come across in this direction and not parallel down my lines. Okay, so I want to take a step back and a step sideways, so your body and hips are out of the way, and your shoulder, elbow and wrist can all move in a nice even straight line. So imagine you're playing pool or snooker, you want to be able to move that cue right the way through in a nice straight line. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for. So I want to take a step back. Okay, so don't be too close, give yourself room, and what I'm going to do is lightly grip the saw. Okay, so I'm not going to grip it really tightly, I'm just going to fatigue my hand and arm and get tired quickly, and I'm going to be tense and it's not going to flow and give me a nice straight cut. So just a nice light grip, okay, and point the index finger down the saw. So pointing the index finger down the saw helps with the rigidity in the wrist and arm and hand. Okay, so if you've got your saw here, it's easy to twist like this, less flexible wrist. If you point your finger and try and keep this in a straight line, it's not as easy to do that, it's just a little bit more controlled. Okay, so point the index finger down the saw plate. So step back. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, actually, I'm going to mark the waist. Okay, so on here, I'm going to put a cross in what's going to be the waist of the timber. So these are going to be the parts I'm going to cut out. Okay, so on the waist side of the line, so always cutting on the waist side of the line, so cut as close to the line as you're confident. I'm going to try for about 0.5 millimeter, and I'm going to use my thumb as just the round edge of my thumb as just a small kind of guide for the saw. Okay, so I'm going to rest my thumb on here. So nice step back, nice body position, nice and stable. And I'm just going to line up that saw about 0.5 millimeter into the waist side of the line. Just put the round tip of my thumb there, and I'm going to start with the saw just on the back corner of the piece of timber. If you try and start across the whole piece of timber, it can judder and throw you off course. Okay, so I'm just going to start like that. So nice and gentle, nice light grip on the saw. Take the weight of the saw in your hand, so don't push down, take the weight of the saw. Okay, and then gently push forward. Okay, don't draw it back. If you draw it back across your timber, you'll hear lots of chattering. So the teeth on here cut on the push stroke, so they cut as you push it forward. If you pull it back, you'll get lots of divots in the top of your timber, and then when you go to push forward, the teeth will sink into those divots and it'll be harder for you to get going. Okay, so be confident with it. A nice light stroke, and gently lower this back hand down into the top of the timber. So I've barely gone into my timber about 0.5 millimeter. Okay, so I've only just come parallel across the top. Let's drop that back in there. Okay, so now I've got this line perpendicular across the top here. I don't have to worry about that anymore. All I have to do is, from the side you're visualizing, you're viewing, just track down this line. Okay, so that's all I've got to worry about now. Try and get nose, wrist, elbow, shoulder all in a nice line. Don't push down, let the saw take the weight of the saw, and just gently. Now I can take my thumb away. Just check how I'm doing. Keep checking, yeah, it's looking good. Whoops. Gently blow the dust away. I say gently, don't blow the dust everywhere. Just gently enough to get it out of the way so you can see what you're doing. As you start approaching that line, you want to slow it down and stop. Okay, so there you can see what I've done. Turn it around so you can see that side. So with that, I'm really happy with that. Okay, so if you look compared to the line I drew, okay, my saw cut is nice and parallel to that line. Okay, and across the top it's nice and parallel to that line. So that tells me I'm sawing nice and straight and true down that line. Sometimes what you'll find is you'll be nice and close down the front, or it'll wander off one way or the other, to the left or right on the other side. If that's the case, you need to adjust your body position so your saw isn't forced one way or the other way. So take a step back, move your back foot back slightly. Okay, so I'm right-handed, so I've got my left foot in front, my right foot behind me. Okay, and it is actually a little bit behind my front foot. Okay, so I've got my front foot here, my back foot is actually a little bit behind it over here. Okay, so nothing is getting in my way. This hip isn't getting in the way, and your arm can travel nice and freely through that piece of timber. Okay, so we'll just do another one. So on this one, I've cut to the right hand side of the line. I'm going to miss one, and on this one I'm going to cut into the waist, so that's going to be on the left hand side of the line this time. Okay, so nice light grip, finger down the saw, thumb just, so this one's a little bit more tricky because you've got a sight over to be able to see that line, so you could turn the timber around in the vise if you want to, so your view is on the right side again, but try and get used to it. It doesn't take long just to get used to having your nose over your wrist and sighting down the other side of the saw plate. Again, just pushing forward and lowering down, so I'm starting on the corner and lowering down as I move forward and backwards. Okay, so start in the corner and lower down, and again I've barely gone down into the timber 0.5 millimetre. I'm just establishing that line across the top of the timber, which is nice and parallel. So now all I've got to do is worry about, from my viewpoint, tracking down this vertical line. Okay, so again, feet out the way, arm, nose, nice and gently, don't push down. If I push down, there's nothing I can do with that, it's just getting stuck. Nice and light, take the weight of the saw. Okay, so again, let's have a look, see how we did. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that one.